Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to yet another uLaw webinar. And today's webinar topic is about matter management. We're going to take a deeper dive into looking at various different features and functionalities that we, as a software company, provide clients, prospective clients, and everyone who has used uLaw. For existing clients, it's a great refresher, and for those who are just getting started with uLaw, it's a good deep dive into the features and functionalities. Letting you know up front that this webinar is not accredited for CPD hours. We do have our CPD accredited webinar towards the end of the month. That being said, I certainly wanted this to be less of me talking and more of me demonstrating the product's features and functionalities. So let me jump right into it. And I kindly request you to use the chat window if you want to ask any questions. Our support staff are available to answer those. And if I can use them within my script of demonstrating it to you, I'll be more than happy to do so as well. So it's going to be a pretty simple agenda. All uLaw webinars do have an agenda, and so does this particular webinar. And the agenda is going to be matter management within uLaw, right? And we're going to talk about how you could create matters. A very important feature is about how you can copy matters. So let's say you've created that ideal small claim, that ideal real estate matter, that first matter, and let's say you've only focused on that one specific area of practice, and then the next client comes along who you know is a very similar fence issue or a very similar POA issue or a very similar set of dockets and set of steps that you take in invoicing this individual. We have an opportunity for you to copy over that matter, that ideal matter, to the second client as well. So we're going to walk through that quickly to demonstrate that feature. Then really look at how you can docket, the different types of docketing. We'll reiterate types of areas of practice and how docketing becomes important. Disbursements, how you can quickly put in your disbursements, how that reflects within your document generation of an invoice. We'll look at pre-bills, look at all the reports and documents that you can generate for a matter. And we'll also look at additional parties and how you can, for certain silos of practice, where we do have our court form automation feature, I'd like to highlight our additional parties feature and walk you through a simple example of how that relates to the matter. We'll also quickly look at one of the newer features in uLaw, which is the integrated payment collection. And that's about how you could quickly intake both your trust payment as well as a general payment for your client for that particular matter, and integrate it with, say, Monaris, pivotal payments, and one of our recent new additions was TD Canada Trust, and how you can use any of one of these three third-party gateways to accept payments right through uLaw. Okay? You do not pay uLaw anything for that feature. It's all within the monthly or annual subscription that you have. You obviously would be paying TD, Monaris, or Pivotal a certain percentage as a transaction fee, which you would do anyways. And last, we'll leave the webinar with the matter analytics. So we'll look at some of the analytics that we provide you in the reporting and the dashboarding we provide you at a matter level so that you can better appreciate that matter and understand what's actually happened, especially if you're revisiting that matter after a certain period of time. Okay? So it's going to be a really straightforward, crisp agenda, and I'd like to focus my attention and your attention, please, to the demonstration, which is just following after this. For those who don't know who we are a Canadian legal accounting and practice management software. We highly encourage you to visit our website, and we do offer no obligation 30-day trial that you can sign up for. Now let me shift gears real quick. Now, as always in my demonstrations, I use our Playground account or practice account, and I'm logged in as a fictitious lawyer, Roger Moore. This could be a paralegal, any legal professional in Canada. I'm using Roger Moore as my fictitious lawyer, and this is the landing page, the dashboard. There's always a lot of correlation between the matter to the dashboard to the calendar, but we're going to focus mostly on the matter screen and then surround and extend that with other capabilities that within uLaw that support the whole matter management. Okay. So one of the first steps that you would take in uLaw, obviously before you even create a matter, is actually create a client. So you're obviously creating a matter for a client. So one of the first steps you would do is come into the contacts panel and actually add new client or a contact in the clients group. Now you have the opportunity, and this is a simple client intake form. You can obviously add more information to it. Keep in mind that a client could be an individual or could be a corporation or a business that you're looking to represent. So if it's an employment law and you're working with an employer, say Rogers or ABCD Incorporation, then obviously your client is an incorporation or a company. Whereas if you're working for the employee, or let's say a small claims matter where you're working with an individual, then obviously this is not a corporation. This is an individual who has a first name, last name, and everything else, all the information that you can capture. So let's quickly go ahead and add an individual's name, and I'm just going to skip, some of the core aspects of it. Let's say we got it through a client referral. Let's just provide an address to this individual client. So I'll say 94 Queen Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and I'm going to mark this as my work address and mark it as my correspondence address, which also gets repurposed within a matter for court form generation. Okay, so each and every step actually has a meaning within uLaw. The mailing address is the address that gets used to populate your court forms. You could populate a phone number, email, then you could use the uLaw app, Android or iOS, to use it almost as a phone book. Let's go ahead and click Save. We're going to save that particular client's information. Now you obviously can do a conflict screening. There are many other things that you can work on the contact. You can generate reports, marketing reports about where your contacts are coming from. But I'm going to skip all of that, and assuming that you've done the conflict screening and you're confident and comfortable working or representing with Simon, you're going to go ahead and create a new matter screen, right? Or a new matter rather for Simon. So to do that, you would click on the matter button, and this is where the fun begins. This is where a good majority of our clients spend their time in uLaw. Now the matter screen that you have in front of you is a fresh blank slate. It's a brand new matter, and it's a new client, so you only have one particular matter for Simon at this time that you're going to create. Now the two pieces of information in any matter that we ask for as a mandatory field really is a title that you can put on a file, also allows you to search for it, also allows you to give it context to what that file is, and what we call as an area of practice. Okay, an area of practice is those areas of practice that you focus on. This is a configurable list that you can create on your own, and you could be as innovative as you want to be in how you define these areas of practice. So we have clients who only focus on criminal law, but then they would like to really understand, criminal law GTA, criminal law Ottawa, so they really want to know where their clients are coming from, but also revenue that's being made within that one area of practice, but geographically spread out. So let's say this is a quick and easy flat rate POA HTA matter. So let's take that as a simplistic matter to begin with. I'm going to say speeding. $84.50 Yonge Street. Okay, and I'm just going to hit the save button. Now, as soon as you hit the save button, one of the first things that happens after it's saved is uLaw generates a file number or a matter number for you. And this is a unique number as per the Law Society's requirements, so it's easy to index, easy to search. And we actually take the individual's first name, first alphabet, last name, first alphabet, and we hashtag today's date and time so that it always stays unique. Okay? Now, if you are migrating over from another system into uLaw, and there's a certain way that you've managed your file numbering system, you're more than happy to bring that right within the matter description. Okay? You can enter that in the matter description, and you can search for it even within our quick view. And a quick view is kind of a sidekick to the matter, because this truly is how you could search for any matter-related information. We'll look at it later on, but you can classify a given matter as active, closed, or archived so that you could provide a logical closure to that particular matter. And you can always change statuses from active, closed, or archived. And truly, there are no business rules behind it. The only business rule is that for any closed matter, you can't dock it. You gotta activate it so that you can start docket or working on it again. Okay? So you can use the quick view, which kind of goes hand in hand with our matter management, to search for matters. So if all you know is Simon, you're just going to quickly search for that, and it's a free search, a free text search. It brings out all the information. As you can see, had you provided your own file numbering system, let's say coming from another software such as PC Law or anything else, you can put it right under matter description. So you could say 2017, this is the month of September, and this is my first file. Okay. You could use the same file numbering order or system to search for the same Simon Garfield matter. Okay. So if you know that 2017-09, it's obviously going to bring out that particular matter that you're looking for. You just click on the title and jump right into that matter. So that's how you could quickly search for any matter information and jump into that matter screen. That's kind of our first segue into getting into a matter screen. Now, before I get into docketing and dispersing the client, I want to spend a little bit focusing on the lay of the land. Okay. So the edit button is if ever you want to change any high-level information, you want to capture any notes. Even a very common example would be changing your tax rate. So let's say you are a fresh paralegal lawyer who doesn't have a HST number yet. You're just getting started with your business. You probably, for your docketing, would not charge your client the HST. So, or if in the case where you don't want to charge HST, even if you have one, at a matter-to-matter level, this is where you could actually tell us that you don't want to charge it and make that default tax rate as 0%. So then uLaw understands that for this particular matter, you're not going to be charging HST for your dockets. Okay? But if you leave it empty, it's going to know that you have to take the default tax rate based on your jurisdiction. So now that I have Roger Moore, who is a lawyer in Ontario, it's going to use the 13% HST as the default tax rate. Now then comes the next, big ticket button within uLaw, which really has that, the complete set of functionalities that you can accomplish within this matter screen. Okay, so the action button truly is where all the action is. A subset of the functionalities you can use within the action button are then spread across, if you will, across other tabs. So for example, a new retainer, which is truly a deposit and trust, so that's easier for you to recognize, is also made available to you under this tab, Disbursements Retainer, under New Retainer. So if you actually look at it, it is the same screen. We leave it to our users to get friendly with an intuitive way that they want to maneuver to that particular screen. Okay? But keep in mind, at any time, if you've lost or if you've forgotten how to get to a certain action item, you're going to always come back to the action button, and we've got the superset of all the functionalities that you can accomplish. So now a new matter is truly creating another matter for Simon Garfield. So let's say Simon Garfield, after this matter, let's do that after we've completed this POA. We'll close it and we'll jump into a new matter for Simon. We'll also copy Simon's information or this entire matter information to another POA matter, let's say for Edward, right? We'll talk about how you can accept client payment. You can refund payments if someone has overpaid you. You can add a new disbursement. and all the other types of disbursements, miscellaneous, consultancy expense or disbursement, and also the most important, move money from trust to general. And then now grouped by, where the action happens, you've got accepting a new retainer. And for certain silos of practice, such as real estate, you could have a settlement payout deposit into trust where you're actually getting a settlement payment from another party. And when you're actually paying out from that deposit from trust out, and these two obviously go hand in hand, because they're both deposits into trust. So let's say if it's not a retainer, if it's not a settlement payout, some other type of money coming into trust, then you could use that option. And just to reverse, if you're taking money out of the trust account or withdrawal, what are the possible ways in which you could have done that? You could have either refunded the retainer, settlement pay-in coming and payout going out, likewise other payment deposit in trust, you got other payout from trust. And the last thing where it may have happened in a real estate is, let's say you have two matters for same Garfield, but one is a purchase of a condo and another is selling of a condo. You may actually move money from one matter to another. And that's what we call an inter-matter trust transfer. Last but not the least, most of the times this is an overlooked aspect to the matter management, is how do I add a discount? So I'm halfway through docketing and dispersing and embracing invoices, and I suddenly realized I owe this guy a discount of $50 because he asked me for it. This is where you would come in and use that to apply before you invoice it to the client. If you want to actually write off an invoice or write off a component, you would obviously write it off because you're not going to be able to recover that money, and you don't want to declare it as a discount either. And for the last option under our action button here, just paint the picture again, is the reversal of an invoice. So as much as we encourage you to do your pre-bills, you do that, you raise an invoice, but then before you do that trust transfer, you realize that you made a mistake, you want to go reverse that so that you can correct that, the components of that invoice cycle. This is where you would reverse an invoice and then re-enter your dockets and disbursements, generate another invoice. Okay, so this is kind of the overarching set of functionalities. You can obviously mark a matter at any time as closed or archived. And for the second most important button within a matter screen, if you will, are all the possible documents, reports, and court forms that you can generate for this matter. Because these are two main things that you're doing for a matter at any given time. Before we jump into the document generation, let's actually step back into accepting a retainer. In fact, for this POA case, let's not accept a retainer. Let's just go ahead and have one simple flat rate docket that represents the overall matter, and we'll take that as an example. Okay? So let's say you've actually completed this work, and I'll leave the data as it is. We have clients who actually represent all the work that was done for this matter in one single docket. They call it POA matter as a title. And click on the description, and this is where you can really explain, because this is going to represent in your invoice, if you choose to, as to all the work that you've actually done for the money that you're asking for. Right? So, initial client meeting, second meeting, you could say court visit, and okay, so let's say we're going to keep it really simple, and we have a very a WYSIWYG editor, if you will, so you can actually highlight it and bulletize it, and it looks really nice when you combine the title and description within your invoice. You can bold it, italics it, you can take the time to play around with it. Now I'm going to represent a few things. Overall, let's say I spent about 2 hours in doing that, or maybe 3 hours with all the court visit. And I'm going to charge a flat rate of $500, okay? Or let's say, I'll say 500. And I'm just going to hit save. So this is your one docket that represents the work that has been done for this entire matter. And you can see, because there's no retainer, the projected balance says that the client owes you, if you were to invoice the client right now, the client owes you $565. Now let's take that example where you're going to say, you know what, I'm not going to charge the HST. I don't have a HST account. It's only $500. And let's go to edit, make that default tax rate, make it 0, override that default tax rate to 0, and click the Save button. And now you see that the 13%, which corresponded to the $65 in addition, does not show. So let's go ahead and raise an invoice, before which let's do a quick pre-bill. Now, whether it's a pre-bill or invoice, you have a few options. The pre-bill obviously is a safe bet because you want to generate that. It's for your internal eyes only. It does not generate an invoice number, nor does it actually reflect the books. In uLaw, we have quite a few invoice themes. Anything uLaw theme and below pretty much has the same look and feel to it with various different colors. Whereas if you're looking for a particular invoice which has your logo or your banner on it, then you probably want to use the themes above uLaw theme. So let's choose the fall theme. You have a few options. You can, if you've got a retainer, you may have marked this as paid, so your client knows that they don't have to make a payment. You make the determination whether you want to show the description or not. You want to hide summary details if this is a legal aid type of invoice. If you want to make it eco-friendly, reduce the number of pages. If you only want to show the summary, which just says $500, that's it, period. We're not telling you what it's for. And you can always backdate this invoice, especially if you're catching up. If you're migrating over and you're catching up, you can always backdate this invoice to reflect it in uLaw. Let me go ahead and click Preview. As a first step, I highly encourage all our clients to do this before they actually generate an invoice. Not that it's set in stone, but obviously once you've generated an invoice, ledgers are being reflected, and then you may have to go back and reverse it, right? You can see there's no invoice number for a preview. This particular theme would give you an invoice that would look and feel like this. It would potentially could have your banner right at the top, your logo, the individual or your client's name, and the correspondence address. It tells them the title of this particular matter. You have a look at it. This is how it represents in one single docket, the overall matter. And it's so true, but fall is upon us real soon. So let's just face it and deal with it and move on. And basically tells your client that's the amount due. So now you make a determination, all right, this looks good. I'm just going to add a quick disbursement to it. So I'm just going to go in and say add new disbursement, paid from general. And I'm going to say add the court fee, which I missed. I'm going to say it's $575, tax exempt, and I actually paid to the Ministry of Attorney General, and I used my checkbook and wrote them a check. Okay? So that's how easy it is. That's one of the core components of the matter screen, is that you can also add disbursements to that invoice cycle. So let's go ahead and print that check. You can add additional descriptions if you like. Okay, and actually print the check. uLaw, this is one of the cool features that if you have your check leaflet on your printer, on your laser printer, and you generate this check PDF from uLaw, you don't have to handwrite checks anymore. You just print this, and you can be rest assured that this would emboss right on top of your check leaflet. This would be the remittances at the bottom. Okay? So now you've added that. You look at the overall billing being $575. If you want to generate a pre-bill, you could do that. But for purposes of time, let me go ahead and click the Complete button, and that's how you would actually generate a real invoice. And this time, just to show you a difference, let me use the uLaw theme. And this particular theme and everything below would almost kind of look the same without the banner and without the logo. Choose the terms, the date that you raised. You can also choose an email. By default, this would be the email that you provided us as part of your settings details. And this sends you a small snippet of the summary of this particular invoice. And that's a setting matter. If you don't want that, you can always turn it off. And this is the only place in uLaw where it's kind of a two-step process. And we encourage and request our clients to wait for this download button. And only when you click this download button does the actual invoice and the corresponding ledgers happen within uLaw. Okay? But the only two-step process. So let's say you've generated, so this is what that uLaw theme looks like. First invoice that we've generated in today's demo. Slightly different theme. You don't have the banner, you don't have the logo. One thing I like about it is right away it tells your client the amount owing, right? The title has a complete picture of everything that was done or accomplished within that one docket as an overarching matter. No taxes, $500. And then you've got a running bill, which captures the disbursements and your retainers if involved. Okay, so here's the court fee of $75 without any taxes. And it's got $575 as the total amount due. Okay. Now, a quick segue to one of the other features we want to talk about is the integrated payment. So I'm just going to take advantage of this demo now to showcase that to you. In uLaw, as part of your settings and part of your accounts, you have the opportunity to integrate with third-party payment gateways. Today, we integrate with 3 companies. These are Canadian, and they ensure trust compliance because they give you your own trust and general accounts and give you the opportunity to integrate with them. They obviously would charge you a transaction fee for every transaction. uLaw does not charge you any money at all. Okay? So let's go ahead, and I'm going to say Pivotal as one example. You could use Monaris, you could use TD. And if you have that integration going with uLaw, one of the areas that you can actually look to integrate and accept kind of a self-serve, if you will, is introduce that as a link within the invoice. Okay? We automatically introduce that, in fact, if you're integrated with payments and if you actually have a client that owes you money. So when you send this electronically, okay, so let's say you open an email and you electronically send this invoice, your client would receive this electronic copy of your invoice along with this link, and he or she, in this case Simon, could open the email, open the invoice, click on this particular link, and Simon actually could pay for that $575 at his own leisure. Okay? You don't have to follow up, accept credit cards over the phone. Gone are those days. You make it simple and easy for you to go ahead. So let's say I'm going to put a fake number in. Don't try this at home. I've tried it. Doesn't work. And I use that joke all the time. So I'm just going to say Simon pays for it. He just clicked on Pay Now. Simon gets an email. You, in fact, get an email as well. It tells you the unique reference number. So let's just copy the unique reference number. Just letting you know, if I go back to my email, here's the quick invoice summary. As soon as that invoice was sent, here's the little summary that we send you. The client owes you $575. As soon as payment was done, all within the context of the matter, right? All this is happening right within the matter page. Here is the order ID, and here's, so you're actually just, at a holiday resort, and you just received this email that someone's paid you. Perfect. You didn't have to follow up, none of that. What you're doing right now is copying that, going into uLaw, and telling uLaw that that payment came through. So today this is a bit of a manual step, but in our forthcoming releases, we're going to introduce the ability for you to automate this whole adding this back into uLaw feature. Okay, we're going to automate that whole ledgering, if you will. But for now, you just come back into uLaw. You could say action, client payment. I'm accepting that $575. And you say, you know what? It was a credit card payment. That's the, you're putting that into your general account. Give them a receipt. Hit apply. Once you accepted that, you get the payment receipt. Always a great idea to send that out. You just compose an email. If you'd like to sign it, you can sign it, scan, and resend it. Otherwise, you're just drag and dropping it into your email, and you're sending this to your client. Okay, and that's how you would send your invoice too, electronically. So the whole cycle of accepting or creating a matter for a contact Simon Garfield or client Simon Garfield for a POA matter, putting one docket, one disbursement, doing pre-bills, generating that invoice, and accepting a self-serve payment all happened within the context of this first example that we looked at. Okay. Now a few things. Now obviously this status you've noticed changed from invoice pending to no pending invoice. So if you were to click on it, and I highly encourage you to be brave about clicking any links that you see that are colored, any images that are available, they are all there for a meaning. This highlights that one particular invoice that you have generated so far with the date, and you have the opportunity to reprint it. So let's say Simon came back to you and he said, you know what, that one particular invoice, I may have lost a physical copy of it, especially if you did not send it electronically. This is an opportunity for you to reprint it, and you can reprint it in any other theme. Okay. Last but not the least, for this particular example, I want to draw your attention to the question mark. The question mark is what we call as the matter analytics. Okay, so it's really telling you what's happened with this matter so far, and if there are actionable money-making tasks that you can do to make money, and we'll jump into it in our next example, this would highlight to you in red of those, those examples that you could take. So it tells you that you know deposit and trust. This was a pure play general payment. It was an invoice for $575 that got paid in full. Right? That was when it was invoiced. That was when the payment came through. You can click on the ledger to quickly look at your general ledger for this particular client. You can see the general ledger is zero balance. You can draw more insights about this particular matter so far. Number of invoices raised so far, 1. The total invoice, total paid. Okay. And let's say you're totally happy with this. The last thing you have to do is, let's say, generate court forms. And that's where our next subweight topic comes into play, is the additional parties. So let's take a look at this particular example and associate individuals, or maybe not for speeding. Let's go ahead and generate, let's say, a POA form, notice of intention, and I'll jump into a small claims example to show you how you can add additional parties, and then we'll copy that as well. So here's a quick example of an intention to appear where we're able to pre-fill some information that we already know based on the information you provided, uLaw, with the individual's name, address. Okay. So this is one quick example of how we can automate certain court forms. So let's say there is another matter, another client rather, Edward. We looked at that, and let's say he's a POA as well. And you know this one ideal matter that you created for Simon Garfield, who is a POA HTA. When the next similar POA HTA client comes around, all you're doing is, and you could do this, this is a shortcut. So you go into add new contact, add that individual to your clients. So let's say Edward Garfield. I'm just going to say Garf. I'm not going to even provide the address for now. This is just to showcase to you how you can copy a matter and all the dockets in it so that it's almost templatized from one matter to another. So let's go ahead and create that second client, Simon Garf, who's just come to your office. As you closed out this POA matter, that individual showed up in your office and said, you know what, I was a 90/60 on Young Street. And you're like, perfect. I just closed a matter for Simon Garfield, and I think it would be ideal to use the same thing for this individual. What do? You go to that particular matter. So you can, this is where a quick view comes really handy, especially if you can, let's say you've closed this matter. Or maybe I won't close it. I'll just keep it active for the purpose of this demo. Okay. Let me keep it active. You're going to choose that particular ideal file and copy this entire structure of this file over to this new client that you just added, Edward Garf. You can choose the start date, avoid weekend holidays if you've docketed in the past. Let's also add in description. So let's say there are standard descriptions that you put in for each docket. You can actually copy over those too. I'm just going to say copy matter. So it's always from to. From that ideal matter that you've already created to this new contact was going to be used for the same purposes of the matter. Now you're going to use the search option within our matter screen, which is sometimes overlooked. Let's just search for Garf. There is Mr. Edward Garf. And you're going to see the same matter, speeding 80/50 Young Street got copied over, and so did all the information, including the total time you spent on it, except the time that you're going to charge this client. Maybe this is a special client. You don't want to charge him $500. You're going to charge him $350. That's totally left to you, but keep in mind you didn't have to re-enter those dockets. Now, obviously, this is not a great example because we just have one docket, but imagine if this were a matter where you had, 10, 15, 20 dockets. And let's say that's a standard set of docketing that you would do for a particular type of matter. Then the copy matter becomes very powerful when you're repurposing that ideal structure to another matter. Okay? Now, obviously, let's just rename this. Let's say this was a fence issue. Steffi. Now, Steffi is a contact in my database that I know. It's a prerequisite that you store that information prior, but I'm just going to use this as an example. I'm going to say this is a small claims matter. Okay, so for Edward Garf, just gone ahead and created in shortcut a small claims matter. Let me just delete that entire docket, though I just showed it to you as a mechanism for you to copy over. I'm going to move into my next part of my demo where I'm going to walk you through a small claims matter. And now we're going to introduce a new component of that of a retainer. Okay, so let's start with you creating this matter. And in my previous example for Simon Garfield, we just looked at a straightforward do my work, then get paid. I'm going to introduce you to how you can accept a retainer and then start working. So the first step, click on Action, Deposit in Trust, New Retainer. And let's say you're accepting a $500 retainer. And let's backdate this to the 28th of August. And I'm going to show you another integration touch point with this third-party gateway. Now, if this person paid you via check or if they paid you cash, you're obviously happy to put that in. But let me show you how you would integrate with third-party credit card processing company right with the uLaw. One example was that that of a self-serve through an email. Let's assume Edward is in your office. He has his credit card, and you're just accepting it. So let's hit payment collection, validate the fields, and I'm going to say collect payment now. You see it's almost the same screen. With Edward being in front of you, you could just basically ask him for his number. I'm just going to use, sorry about that. I'm going to use 5454. I'm going to say it's Edward Garf. And let me go ahead and accept that. Now, if by any chance the credit card did not go through, we would come back and tell you that this was not approved so that you can then quickly go back to Edward and ask him for another credit card. That way you're not dealing with bounce checks, and you can be rest assured that this $500 retainer gets deposited into your trust account, and the transaction fee, whether it's 1% or 1.5%, gets transacted out of your general account. Okay? So likewise, you can take that unique reference number, credit card, put it in your description, give him a receipt, and get started. Okay? So we've just accepted a $500 retainer, and there it is. And there's a retainer receipt, always a great habit to generate these. And you can customize this with your logo. You would sign it, your client signs it. It has all the information that you need to be represented in the retainer receipt. There's also a duplicate you can generate. You could also go ahead and generate a sales receipt just in case Edward asks for it. All right, so now let's look at a few other examples of how you can docket with the uLaw. One is the most common, which is the billable type. Now by default, because of my settings, this docket is a flat rate docket. Now how do I toggle this to a billable type? By just using this little arrow here, uncheck flat rate, and it becomes a billable type. Okay, so let me backdate this real quick. So I'll see on the 28th, I had an initial client meeting, and we have a smart dictionary. So if you've actually typed this before, we know that it's a type of event title that you're most commonly going to use. So we prompt it to you so that you don't, reduces typing. So you could say client meeting with Ed. And let's say this was, you spent 1 hour on it, and you're going to charge 1 hour for it. Keep in mind, the rate gets copied over from your settings, and you can always overwrite it before you've invoiced this guy and used it actually in a docket. So if you wanted to reduce it to $150, this is a great time to do so. So once you've done that, uLaw is going to take the 1 hour, multiply it by 150, add the 13%, or in fact, because we copied over, it also copied over the default tax rate. I'm going to leave that as a default tax rate. And now you're going to notice that it's added the 13% tax. Now let's add another docket, and you can always mix and match, docket types in uLaw. So let's say there was a document generation or document drafting. Let's say this is a flat rate. You're just going to charge them $100 for it. Do that. Okay. Always remember to hit the Save button. You can do pro bono docket, so we always keep in mind the Good Samaritanship that you've had and all those clients that have benefited from that. You could do different types of disbursements. So let's say there was a stand-in. You had a consultancy expense for, for another paralegal or a lawyer to represent you at the Court of Hamilton, somewhere you can travel to. So you could say paralegal expense, and say charging $100 for it. So let's say you then report that expense to your business. Let's say you used a paralegal and they charged you $75. So obviously you're marking up $25. You're making that money out of that. You can say uLaw Paralegal Inc. And let's say you're paying out of your general account, wrote them a check. Let's say. So we've got a couple of different types of disbursements now. One was a simple court fee, and now we've got a consultancy fee or a third-party consultancy fee with a markup. We've also got a few types of dockets. Draw your attention to this little clock. Click on it. It's basically a timer, especially if it's a telephone conversation. You can always pause it, fast forward it, and docket it when you're ready. It's most often used for telephone conversations. It's part of the Edward Garf matter. Now, drawing your attention as we're at this clock is also these two additional new buttons that we provided you with. So one is a calculator. So most of our clients sometimes they say, well, it's $500, but we don't know what it is before tax. So we've got a pre-tax flat rate calculator. You click on it, put in basically the actual number, and we give you pre-tax based on whichever your tax code your jurisdiction has. Okay? So if you really want to know what $500 of revenue would be worth, that's the $565. And then you can quickly add that to your matter as a flat fee rate pre-tax. Okay? And the last button here, again, for certain silos of practice, is a contingency. Again, it's a little calculator as well. If you were to use this contingency option, we're just going to ask you, all right, how much is the contingency if you know it? Okay, let's say it's $100,000 or $10,000. And we ask, all right, what is your fee? What is your contingency fee if you were to win this for your client? How much do you plan on charging them? Let's say it's $20, 20%. That's your amount. Now you can add that particular as a docket too. And the important aspect to it is we add a little bit of a blurb onto your description, saying the contingency fee as negotiated is $2,000, which is the 20% on the $10,000. Okay, so you can always update this, right? Both types that you can do whatever you like, just to give you options, let you know what options you have available. As you notice, it's invoice pending. I'll also draw your attention as to how the matter page now or the screen works along with the other aspects of the product. So if you were to go into your dashboard, you're going to notice this one particular dashboard widget called Invoice Pending Matter. It's basically highlighting all of those matters for which you've put in the effort, but you've not raised an invoice. Okay, so here is your fence issue with Steffi. Click on it. You know exactly that you have to raise an invoice. That's exactly what you're going to do. So let's go ahead and raise that invoice. So I'm going to use maybe a teal blue. I'm actually going to mark this as paid because there's still money left in trust, just letting the client know that they actually don't have to pay me, and this has all been taken care of. Let's assume that this was on the 30th. Let me go ahead and invoice. Same thing, same step. You're going to invoice and download. Now, as I wait for that invoice to download, there it is. Okay, just to show you an example of how this invoice would be represented with a retainer involved, it tells you right away the balance left in trust. It tells you all the dockets that you put in for this particular matter, with tax, without tax, right? Here's the 3640 of tax. And that's the total docketable invoice number, 31640. And you've got a disbursement, which is that paralegal expense of 113. And the running bill also highlights so that your client is fully confident about this invoice and he's not following up, or he or she is not following up for further clarifications, because that's just non-billable time. That's just time spent. Many times you can't charge it back to your client. So this one particular document kind of outlines it all. tells him that, hey, that's when you paid me through that credit card transaction. Last but not the least, with that paid stamp, he knows that there's no action that he needs to take. There's no bills to pay. He's already paid it to you in advance. And he knows that that's the amount of a retainer that's still left in trust. Now, you could always include it in your invoice terms, and you can add other additional notes, which says always top up your retainer if it's below $100 or something like that, or you can put it in your email so that he understands that it's time for a top up of a retainer. Okay, but that's just an example, and this is the money left in trust, right? And two important steps that are to be taken right after this, and you probably know this better. Two important steps. One is to move the money from trust to general. Many of our paralegal friends, lawyer friends, sometimes with their busy life do forget that. And that's why we have this question mark at any time. It becomes your friendly button, which highlights that action that you can take to make the money. If anything in red, you're going to click on it. So that is the eligible amount that you can now transfer from trust to general, the fact that you've now raised that invoice. You can choose the individual items that you want to choose. You see that it's always going to be the eligible amount, nothing more, nothing less. Moving it from your trust to your general account. And in Ontario, when you do an electronic fund transfer, which is basically using online banking to move money from one electronic account to another, you do have to fill out Form 9A. And what we do is, if you provide us the information one time, because this is the information they ask for at any time anyways, we capture it and we pre-populate the Form 9A for you. So what you can do is, within the context of the matter, to another feature, use our Documents tab, which allows you to integrate with either OneDrive or Google Drive. And in this particular example, I have Google Drive as an example. So all those documents that you just generated can actually just be made available right within the matter. Because for each of the unique file numbers that we create in the matter, when you integrate it with Google Drive, we automatically create folders for you within either Google Drive or OneDrive under uLawPractice Matter and under Mr. Edward Graff. And whether it's Form 9A or other documents, you can start just throwing that into that folder, and it starts to be made available right here. Okay, so let's say you went ahead and generated, let's generate that pre-bill again. Could drag and drop it in there. This could also be documents that are outside of uLaw. So let's say you have a driver's license. You can drag and drop that as well into this particular folder. So let's go ahead and finish off this, and let's refund. Let's just add one more docket, final docket. I'm going to just say $40. Leave a little bit of trust left. Okay. Let's quickly erase that final invoice. Again, mark it as paid. And I do apologize that it's a bit of a inundate work to go back and forth. Once I've done that, do the same thing, hit the question mark, move that $45 of eligible trust transfer. There you go. And when you do it the second time, because you do have to do a Form 9A for every such electronic fund transfer, as I mentioned, when you hit the Form 9A, remember the same information that you gave us last time, with just the requisition number changing. And you just drag and drop that Form 9A into that folder of Google Drive or OneDrive. And when you come back to this matter, into the Documents tab, you can be rest assured that all those documents that you've actually dragged and dropped into that folder are all available to you right within the context of this matter. Because these were documents that were generated for this matter, right? So this could be your last invoice that you generated, all available. You can also create subfolders, and that will be available as well. That's a very popular question these days. So with just another few more minutes left, and I think our support staff are ready to answer questions, the last thing that I want to highlight, we've looked at how you can create files, you can copy matter over, you can bring in retainers, use simple matters, have various complex different types of dockets. We looked at how you bring retainers. Let's just finally refund this $25.40. So I'll have action. It's a withdraw from trust, so I'm going to refund the retainer. I'm going to basically write them a check. Refunding retainer. I'm writing it to Edward Graf. I can even print a check, just like the last time. And I'm done. And just to draw your attention, from a disbursement perspective, you have various different options. So you could actually have done the paid from general. You could have actually paid disbursements right off trust, if that's a habit that you have. You have miscellaneous expenses, such as software that you want to, again, use that as an example where you're charging your client something and you're reporting something else. We looked at the example of a consultancy, of a paralegal consultancy expense as well. So you have a few options of representing disbursements in various types. And we looked at different forms. We're also going to have to look at a few reports. One of the most important reports from a matter perspective would be your settlement, right here. Settlements and accounts. So for this particular matter, let's go ahead and generate the settlement account. It's always a great habit to provide this maybe when you're closing out the matter to your client, because it really outlines everything that's actually happened within this context. For example, you had that initial client meeting, you had the document drafting, all the professional services rendered is all captured here, the phone conversation, the final closure, you got the disbursements, if any, right? You've also got that retainer going. So it really outlines everything that's happened. And there was that $25.40 of refund. Also summarizes your legal fees separately, your disbursements, and the invoice payments from trust chronologically. So this one particular statement at the end of the matter is pretty much going to suffice to give your all the clarity and transparency that you can provide as a law firm to your client. Look at all that. Summary of trust and general statements. That's the balance, the $474.60, because you did pay back the remaining $24. So we generate this particular template so that your client has a complete picture of everything that's happened in that matter. And that is under document generation, statements, settlement, and accounts. But you can also do individual. You can generate the general statement for this matter right within here. Show it on screen, download it. And there you go. So you have your general ledger for this particular matter right here. You can also generate the trust ledgers right within the matter screen. And these documents obviously are compliant with the bookkeeping guidelines of the law societies. You got the $500 retainer. and that was the amount that you moved based on the two different invoices that you had, 269091, and here was the final refund of a retainer. All right, so with that, going back to our agenda, so we looked at how to create a matter, copy a matter. We looked at various different types of managing dockets and disbursements. Additional parties, I can maybe jump into real quick because there is a question about it. We looked at document generation, generating invoices, the many reports that you have. We looked at how you can integrate the payment for both trust and general. And if you were to really look at the matter analytics, you have your timelines, which tells you what really happened in this matter at each and every stage. Client meeting, the invoice, the telephone conversation that happened, final closure. And it tells you by date in kind of date range. So in this case where you've got Steffi, I'm just going to assume that Steffi Jones is that particular party. And in the case of a small claims, let me assume that she is the defendant. And me, Roger Moore, I'm representing the plaintiff, Edward Garf. This is where you can associate pre-stored contacts as parties and then generate court forms, whether it's a plaintiff's claim or a defendant claim, whatever that may be. Okay? So then I will now open the floor for any questions that you may have. I think our support staff already started to answer some of those questions. Okay, so they want me to continue down this path of showing you the additional parties. But let me finish that off, the flow where I was going with. So let's say I've added the defendant, Steffi Jones. Let me also add her paralegal, who's the representative of the opponent. Call it Stefan Edberg. So you've got now two parties associated with this matter. And the prerequisite, obviously, is Steffi and Stefan's contact information be stored prior to associating them. So you've got to go into contacts, add a new contact. They would not be a client, so you could create a group called representatives, and then you would add them to the representatives group, right? That's how you'd go about doing that. But once you've done that, then you associate them through the parties, and if you can then go and generate the documents under forms. Let's say for small claims, plaintiff's claim, and let's say you're in Mississauga. There you go. We're going to open up the small claims court that's pre-populated. So you can see most of the information is populated based on the information provided. So you've got Edward Garf, the client, who's the plaintiff, got the address of the court, the claim number, if there was one, your information, the defendant, and you could actually have multiple defendants too. That's another sub-question. And you've got the representative representing the defendant. So that's what we do within our court form automation within the matter screen. I think there's a quick question about whether we calculate the interest on overdue accounts. I think that was a good question, and I believe we have it in our feedback forum to get back to you on that, so we would certainly do that. I believe there is a possibility, there's a report as it is that we can generate that outlines that. Okay, so the last question I think for the day is how do I close out this matter? As I've shown you, you can just go ahead and say mark as closed. Keep in mind, once you've closed this matter, you're not able to docket or disperse or do any of those things, generate invoices. It also puts a little date stamp on when it was closed. So if I actually go ahead and create a new docket, it's basically going to let me know that the matter is not active. Please make the matter active before you make any changes. And all I've got to do is come back, click on active, and make it active again. The whole purpose of giving those different statuses was if you have accomplished or attained a logical closure to that matter, that you can group it, and so that you can then only focus on the active files, saving you time. Especially if there's multiple matters that you do for the same client, it would be that much more easier for you to close out certain files so you're focusing only on the active files. I'll have the Q&A floor open for another couple of more minutes. And again, please do participate and do ask any questions that you may have. Okay, one question we have is, do you have samples of retainer letters? I believe that's what the intent of the question is, because it just says retainer letters. Okay, so right under the document generation, so they clarified that's what the question was about. So right under a document generation for the matter, we looked at invoice. Another very common report is the statement of activity. That really outlines each and every task that was accomplished in this matter. You can generate bill of cost, any retainer or payment receipts that were already generated. But when you walk down that path and get into the documents, these are some of the Law Society documents you can generate right away after you've generated a file for a client. Client ID verification, conflict screening reports, letting the Law Society know why and how you determined that this client was not a conflict, or if you're aware of one. If you come down, you look at authorization letters, non-engagement letter samples. The retainer letter is one where we start you off with some basic examples. So we have simple, elaborate, flat rate examples where you can generate it in both PDF and Word. You could also give us what your intended retainer amount is. So when you actually generate one such document, we start you off with a basic template that you can then repurpose, you can build on top of. Right? We are able to pre-fill all of that information for you. Okay. Likewise, we have some additional examples of retainer letters under letters called hourly, contingency, and some other retainer samples too. Got business letterheads, master letterhead examples. All of that within our documents and reports right under document generation. Non-engagement letter is when the client decides, or you decide to not engage with this client for whatever specific reason. It gives you a quick sample of one such document. You can generate it, again, within uLaw, you can generate documents in general, both in PDF and in Word. And if it's in PDF, many times it's an editable PDF. Absolutely. So to that point about being able to auto-calculate interest, we would certainly get back to you as to how we accomplish it for you. and you can be rest assured that we'll work on that with you. I believe there is. Okay, so auto-calculating interest. Now, we do have a report. Again, I'm trying to segue this real quick, but we do have a report called the aging report, and this is where I would ideally add the interest rate as well. That can then outline what that amount looks like. Now, you are able to export all of that information from a matter in any of these different formats. And I do kindly request you to provide your feedback by using the link provided in the chat window about this particular webinar and any other topics that you'd like us to cover in the future. And reiterating that this particular webinar has not been accredited for CPD. Our CPD webinar would be towards the end of the month. So to the final point about, we do have an aging report by, you can do this by 30, 60, 90, 120 days, but we currently do not include the interest, but yes, we should be able to add the interest once you tell us what that interest amount is to calculate those numbers accordingly. Okay, with that, I would like to close out this webinar, and thank you everyone for participating in this webinar, and you will find the recorded version of this webinar available on our YouTube channel, and we will send it to you via email. If you can only please confirm your attendance and provide your feedback by clicking on the link provided, and we'll be able to send you that link as well. Thank you once again, and have yourself a great long weekend, and we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Thank you.